and I call the member for Murray.
I thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I too will speak on the Social Security Legislation Green Army Program Amendment Bill 2014, which amends the Social Security Act 1991 and the Social Security Admin Act 1999, and I will stick to the bill. I think it's an insult to the member for Richmond's constituency that she dismissed one of the greatest youth employment programs that this country has ever seen, in particular, given this is a second iteration. I had the privilege of being responsible for the old Green Corps program, which was brought into being under the Howard government. It was a stunningly successful program which dealt both with environmental degradation, supporting biodiversity, a whole range of initiatives right across the country, but it also dealt with cultural heritage. And I'll never forget the teams I had employed in the main street of Bendigo helping to rebuild the old iron lace that is a feature of those very old buildings, the goldfield buildings of Bendigo. And I think it was very sad and cynical that this particular speaker, the member for Richmond, tried to use the opportunity to bolster up, I guess, her Green Party support credentials, because after all, she did only receive 33.5% of the primary vote in the last election, and she needed the 17% of the Green candidate's preference to get her over the line. Now, she spent a lot of time being critical of the National Party and suggesting that the National Party is the enemy of the environment. Well, let I remind her that the National Party candidate won the highest number of primary votes in that Richmond campaign. So quite clearly her locals have a different attitude about the policies and the calibre of the National Party people who had wanted to look after the people of Richmond. I'm sure they now regret the final outcome of that campaign or that election. Let me say that the previous speaker too got it so wrong. I'm not sure whether she hasn't read the details or it was just part of her whole cynical approach to saying that this government doesn't have at its core a profound understanding of the needs of the environment, to sustain the environment, to protect our internationally acclaimed biodiversity, because she said, for example, amongst other things, that this particular program would have no safety protections, there'd be no health and safety of participants engaged in the program, the safety and health of the participants engaged in the program wouldn't have any special regulations, bylaws, requirements of state and territory governments in respect to their work, health and safety laws. Well, that's just rubbish. It's, of course, totally wrong. The project sponsors will have to share responsibility for providing a safe workplace, as was the case in the old Green Corps, safe access to work sites, all of the business that goes along in Australia with appropriate response to people working out of doors or in a heritage location. And of course, in claiming that there would be no training outcomes, no certification or no understanding or acceptance of the efforts they'd made during their training, again, totally wrong. If the member for Richmond had taken a couple of minutes to read the details, she would have seen that, in fact, the people who are undertaking this program, could be up to 6 months, will have all of their competencies achieved, recognised under the Australian National Training Framework. They'll get a certificate 1 or 2 depending on what they've done. So it's just a nonsense, and I hope the member for Richmond is listening to my remarks now, so she doesn't go on misleading her own young people who I'm sure are lining up, those in particular who are looking for a gap year or who are currently unemployed, who are not sure if they might want to pursue a full-time career in natural resource management. I hope they get some better support from her as they want to participate in this fantastic new Green Army program. I think she really needs to reassess her current response to this program, or her constituents are going to be even more dissatisfied when it comes to the next campaign, the next election. And let me say too that we have a situation in Australia where, unless we have a government-sponsored program like this, the Green Army program, we are not going to have the jobs done in places like the Great Barmah Forest, the biggest red gum forest in the world. It's in my electorate of Murray. Not surprisingly, I'm very concerned at the weed infestation in there, the feral animals, the loss of Indigenous heritage values in that place. Now, the previous speaker, the member for Richmond, said, oh, this is a shocking program because it's going to mean that all sorts of people go and substitute paid work for these young people undertaking a Green Army project. What rubbish. Clearly she has to get out more and understand the current neglect very often of national parks or state parks or public open places where there is none of this work being carried out because the local council or the state government has other priorities or they don't have the funds. So this program moves into those spaces and places in Australia where we do not have any paid workforce in the normal sense. We don't have anyone at work continuously or even part-time in places like the great Goulburn River riverine precinct, where because unfortunately of the new environmental water holder flows that are being pushed down from the Eildon Reservoir, we have massive bank erosion and gouging, where once our Goulburn River rose and fell according to the seasons, with this massive flushing through the use or the release of the Commonwealth environmental water holder water, we have a destruction of our riparian zone like we've never had before. So we need replanting of the understory and the canopy trees all along the Goulburn River. We need to reinstate a lot of the bankside herbage, and that can't be done. There's no one to do that other than a group like a Green Army. Now, this is going to be a fantastic program in the sense that it offers 17 to 24-year-olds up to 6 months in a project which has been put forward by their own community. It could be the local government, it could be a Rotary club, could be a group of individuals. Those projects, of course, will be carefully assessed in terms of how valuable they are if they're real work. We're not talking about here painting white rocks. We're talking about real environmental or heritage protection work. The projects will require skills and they'll include training. And there will be about 9 team members in each group. I would hope at least 50-50 men and women, young men and women in these groups, and they'll have one supervisor. In my area, I already have a lot of interest being taken by our local Indigenous communities. They see this as a fantastic opportunity for young Indigenous men and women who are starting now to get more of a sense of their own cultural inheritance and their own responsibility for managing the biodiversity in some of their own places, like the Cumragunja Old Mission Station. This is going to be, once again, following on from our old Green Core, one of the best opportunities a young person has to try out a career in natural resource management, or to simply have a sense of what it's like to get up every day, join a team, do real work, and actually do work that is going to give them a sense of contribution to their community. In my area, I am very sad to say we have up to 20% youth unemployment, particularly in places like the fringes of Shepparton. Those 20% young people not employed are looking for work, many of them. It's not there. Or they're so disengaged they've simply given up, and their lives then are spent in a cycle of boredom and helplessness and hopelessness. And so we have a huge ice epidemic problem in my area and a huge problem of binge drinking. I would like to think that a government like ours understands, as it does so well, that putting a 6-month program as an option in front of these young people is an enormously valuable thing to do. When you hear someone like the member for Richmond carrying on as she did, I know she was desperate to get her Green credentials in front of the Greens party to thank them for the support for her in winning her seat. But to misrepresent this program as she did, saying it didn't lead to training credentials, saying that it was not going to be properly managed under occupational health and safety measures, suggesting that it was going to be about substitution for other people already employed in full-time or part-time work, all of that was such nonsense. I just want to reinforce that this particular program will be the biggest youth environmental program that the country's ever seen. It will give such a boost to the young people who are lucky enough to become a part of it. I don't think you can replace work experience of this type for a young person whose alternative is not to be employed at all, or not to know precisely if an outdoor job in natural resource management is for them. I just think this is a most superb program. And I have to say that while it will of course cost us, because these young people will be paid the equivalent of a training allowance, of course the supervisors will be paid appropriately, well of course there's a cost involved, the benefits and the payback to the environment and the community are enormous. I want to commend the Minister for making sure that this was not only a campaign commitment from us, but is being pushed along at a very fast rate so that we expect 250 projects. We have a number ready to go right now, but in the 2014-2015 year, we expect 250 projects with 2,500 young people engaged. And I have to say that there's already in my area projects queuing up and young people asking, how can we be a part of this fantastic new program? I also want to make the point that this is about cultural heritage conservation as much as it's about the more traditional habitat protection, improving water quality, foreshore beach restoration. And I'll never forget a cultural heritage combined foreshore and beach restoration project I went to see when I was managing this program under Green Corps. It was in the western, along the foreshores of the Western District around the Warrnambool area. There they had a lot of beach erosion exposing a lot of indigenous kitchen middens and tool chips, a lot of great implements and examples of the culture of the people who'd gone before. And a lot of Indigenous young people were part of that Green Corps team. Can you imagine the excitement of that young team who were being engaged in, first of all, identifying, then protecting, and then learning about what that cultural heritage of their forefathers and mothers is all about? It was a most stunning project, and one that was not just a 6-month on-off experience for those people, but the protection of those foreshores went on long after the project had ended. And I remember being down in Tasmania and walking along the kilometres of walking tracks and boardwalks which had been built through some of Tasmania's magnificent wilderness, but some of it quite close to places like Hobart. So places that had been inaccessible to individuals in wheelchairs or people pushing prams or people on walking frames, suddenly through the building of these boardwalks and walking tracks, we're able to access some of the most magnificent natural vegetation and ecosystems in the world. This was the work of a local, in those days we called it Green Corps team, and it was hard work. It wasn't easy. These young people had to, first of all, build the tracks, they had to cart a lot of timber in, they had to learn how to construct long-lasting timber structures. They built bridges over streams. It was an extraordinary effort, and those boardwalks and the walking tracks associated with them are still there, and they're a major tourism benefit to the people who come and visit. This business of Green Corps, now called Green Army, will foster teamwork, local ownership, a community spirit. One of the sad things that comes with unemployment for a young person is isolation, a sense of being friendless, a sense of being completely alienated from the community where you live. So for those young people, being able to step into a team which is like-minded, which is training together, they wear the same uniform, they travel together to the location of the work, they eat together in the lunch. They also engage with the volunteers who've often put up the project in the first instance. And some of the things that impressed me most with this program in its first iteration was how often, say if it was a Rotary Club or a Lions Club that had put up the project, they didn't just simply leave the team to it and come back when it was finished and say, oh, that's okay, and move away. They would actually engage with the young team itself, have a barbecue. They'd get in, stuck into it and work alongside them. They'd be saying thank you because this new walk track or this weed work you're doing or this regrowing of the vegetation, this clearing of the olives in the swamp, whatever you're doing, we couldn't have done alone, but we've had a team of you, young people, teams from our own community doing this hard work. We thank you for it. So I commend this program. I think it's magnificent. I think it covers all the bases when it comes to what we need to re-engage some of our youth or to give some of our other youth who just simply want to trial a new potential career direction. This program is for them, and it's going to deliver a lot of real outcomes for communities that need that reed, feral animal work, that heritage protection. So I strongly commend this bill to the House, and I say shame on the previous speaker who either misunderstood or deliberately misled us about what the program's all about.
I thank the member for Murray.